When I was younger, we lived down the road from one of my aunts, so I pretty much grew up with my cousin Tom. We were much more like brothers than cousins, though. We were both only children and did everything together. We even had the same interests as well, which I guess does make a lot of sense. We lived in a more rural tri-state area. Most of our extended family lived in one of the 3 states, but that's not really important. We both lived on a road at the bottom of a couple of foothills, a ways from the nearest town. We lived on a dirt road, but the houses were not very close to each other at all. They were houses for people who wanted to own a big piece of property. To sort of explain, there were hills on the side of the road, and the houses were set in between the hills. On the other side of the road were big rolling fields that could conceivably have been used for farmland. There were some tall, I guess, wheat-looking plants that grew there as well, and they rarely got trimmed down. Then, on the other side of the fields, there were even more hills, but I never went across the fields to check them out. On the hilly side of the road was a dense forest. Tom and I explored this area quite often. We would often walk to each other's houses, but it was quite a long walk. The houses in our area were already really far apart from each other, and he wasn't even the next house over. It could take up to 45 minutes to make the walk there. But yeah, despite all that, Tom and I did a whole lot of things together. Honestly, we spent nearly every single day doing something, especially during the summertime. Obviously, since this is a scary story, and I just described the road that both of our houses were on, the story has to take place there. And yeah, it did. I was 14 years old at the time this happened. I had been hanging out at Tom's house because we had different gaming systems. I would go over there to play his Sega, and he would come over to my place to play my NES. But on this day and this night, I had been over to his house. He had just gotten a new game. I don't really remember what it was, but we had been playing it all day and well into the night. It was a weekend though, on a fall night, so I could sleep in the next day if I wanted to. Before we knew it, it had already become 1:30 in the morning. Now normally I would have just decided to sleep over at their house, but I needed to take this pill that I had to have before going to bed. I had forgotten to bring it with me this time, so I had to go out and walk home to retrieve it. I had made this walk a lot of times, both during the day and during the night, so it was no big deal for me to do so once more. I wasn't scared either or anything like that, but I could understand why others might think it was a creepy atmosphere. It was definitely jacket-wearing weather. It was also extremely windy. It's one of the windy nights when you hear the leaves and branches blowing more than just the regular sound of the wind. I was completely lost in my own thoughts as I was walking along the road. Anyone other than me would have probably been a little bit scared. It was very dark out already, with the sky being overcast, and the breeze was chilly. There were definitely no lights either. I don't know how this first got my attention, but I heard some sound up on the hill. I already mentioned there were lots of sounds due to the wind blowing, but this didn't sound like some random wind noise. The leaves had already turned brown. They had only just begun falling though, so there was some on the ground, but enough still in the trees to make it hard to see up into them. It sounded like someone was walking on the hill. I immediately felt like I was on edge just a little. I had been walking on the side of the road that the hills were on, but I got anxious just after a few minutes, and decided I would walk on the other side, on the field side of the road, just to feel a little bit calmer. I did feel somewhat silly for doing that, but thinking that I had heard someone walking in the trees really rubbed me the wrong way. The entire time I was walking, I felt very tensed up. I really don't know where it was coming from other than the atmosphere. However, I slowly began to believe that someone was up on the hill spying on me from within the trees. I was convinced, though, that it must just be paranoia, but that's when I heard it. In a sing-songy sort of voice that was just slightly hovering over the noise of the wind, I heard the creepiest thing I had ever heard in my life. "I'm going to get you, and then I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get you." I think nowadays if I heard something like that, I would immediately take off running, but honestly I thought maybe my cousin had followed me and was just trying to play a joke on me. Instead, I looked up into the trees to see if it was him. It was dark, so it was really hard to see much. I called out for Tom, trying to see if it was him out there, and I'll never forget this. It was already windy out, but suddenly there was a huge gust of wind when I noticed movement by a tree. I was able to make out in that second that there was someone there, but it was definitely not my cousin. I was not able to completely make the man out, but I was able to tell that he was very tall and very thin. He was hidden halfway behind a tree, obviously peering out at me. I'm not really sure what was going on, but I did know it was not someone I knew, and they had been talking to me. I had to take off right then. I ran down the road, immediately looking back over my shoulder. I expected to see the guy running after me. I was just a bit dumbfounded at first, thinking that someone who had threatened me did not come down and chase me. I actually quit running for a moment. I thought maybe it was just someone trying to mess with me, and I wouldn't really have to run. However, as I began slowing down, I heard the voice call out again. "I'm still coming, you know." The voice came from the forest and just terrified me. I took off running again. I kept looking back. Now I was looking behind me and looking up in the trees. It was terrifying, and I kept hoping I wouldn't fall as I was running away. Every sound behind me or within those trees was terrifying. I didn't hear the man's voice again before I made it to my house. I ran up the driveway and onto the front porch, and I looked back one last time. I saw him standing at the end of our driveway. He just looked at me, then spread his arms out and began running up the driveway laughing. I ran into the house and locked the door behind me as quick as possible. When I turned to look out the window, I didn't see anyone out there. It was like he had just disappeared. I went and woke my dad up and told him what was going on. He got a couple of guns, gave me one, and we went around searching the house and around in our yard. I kept expecting to see the man jump out at me or something, but he wasn't anywhere to be found. When I described him to my dad, he said he had an idea who it was and thought it was just a guy messing with me. He told me he would take care of it. If he did, I never found out. My dad was a big, brawny, barroom brawler type, so if he did know who it was, he probably scared the crap out of them. I don't know, but it made it scary for me to ever go for a walk at night again. I don't know if this story is as much scary as it is really just disturbing, so I apologize beforehand if anyone is disturbed by this. My family didn't move around like a lot of other families that I've known. I grew up in just one house. In fact, my parents still own and live in that same house. It's a nice 2-story home sitting on a country road. There wasn't much you could always count on, but there was one thing you could. There was this guy that lived near us who always rode around on a riding lawnmower. He was always out every day, going up and down the road. He was an older guy too. His mower also had a trailer that pulled it along. I really didn't know exactly why he was always riding on that mower, but I would always hear it off in the distance and know that he was coming down the road. Anyway, it was just a very normal thing to see, a normal thing to hear as well. We didn't have air conditioning, and occasionally we would have a hot, miserable summer time. When this story happened, we were having just that. It was very, very hot outside, and even worse inside the house. I was out on summer vacation, and I just could not spend time inside the house. The day was hot, and I took a beach chair and put it out on my front lawn. I had made some lemonade as well. I was doing my best to try and keep cool. I was miserable, but I guess I dozed off at some point. I was barely conscious when I heard that familiar sound of the lawnmower coming down the street. It was like a dog barking at night, though. I was so used to it by now that I didn't really hear it. In a way, it was sort of a comfortable noise, like white noise or something. However, it was the next noise I heard that totally broke me out of my sleep. I don't even know how to describe it. It was such a horrible noise, and it was extremely loud. it caused me to immediately open my eyes. The old guy that had been driving the lawnmower down the road was lying on the ground, and he was lying under the lawnmower, which was still on. I jumped out of my chair to run over to where the man was laying. I was actually terrified, but I thought it had to be so much worse for the man who was now stuck lying under a running lawnmower. When I first arrived, I wasn't sure what to do. The man looked like he was unconscious, but I figured I'd better turn the mower off first before checking on him. I didn't know a lot about these riding lawnmowers, but I assumed you had to pull a lever or something in order to make the blades start working. As gruesome as the sight was, it was obvious that it wasn't currently mowing him. His body was mangled from being run over, though. I finally got the key and turned it off. Then I tried to turn my attention to him. I first thought that he was knocked out or something, but unfortunately I was very wrong. The man was already dead. I tried to perform CPR on him. I would have yelled for help, but there were no houses close by. When I couldn't revive him myself, I ran into the house and called 911, then went back out to help the man. Apparently, he had had a heart attack and fallen off the lawnmower, which then ran right over him. We were not able to bring him back in the end, unfortunately. I've had a lot of dreams about it since then, and unfortunately the blades were still working in those dreams. To begin with, I've always had this feeling that someone was watching me ever since I moved into my family house 8 years ago. At first, I just thought I'd watched too much ID investigation and was being extremely paranoid, but I couldn't help looking over my shoulder whenever I would walk to school or to my bus stop. Whenever I would walk to school, I was always scared in the mornings when it would be dark during the winter or fall, because where I live is just vast country lands. I live in Canada, and although not much crime happens in my neighborhood, I just never could rid myself of this mysterious, eerie feeling. Even when I would come home from school, being home alone did not help. I would triple-check my windows and locks to make sure everything was sealed shut. However, in my basement, our garage door would never fully lock, since the door hinge was broken and detached from the door. Therefore, it would never properly close. I always told my dad to fix this door, but because he would always go away for work, he just never found the time to do so. Stupidly, I thought nothing bad would happen since my garage needed a 4-digit passcode to get in. On a side note, I just want to let everyone know that never under any circumstances should you put your birthday as your passcode for anything. Even if you switch up the date so that the day comes first and the month comes second, do not do it because it will be extremely obvious. My theory is that he knew the passcode to my house, therefore he had free reign for 7 years to go through my things. At first, I thought I was just being a bit forgetful. Maybe I was the one who misplaced my underwear somewhere. Maybe I was the one who misplaced my favorite top. Or maybe my dad had accidentally donated it or something. I should have known better, though. During my 4 years in high school, he never really contacted me. It was when I went to university that things suddenly started to change. Since I lived in the countryside, I decided to go to a university about an hour away. My dad didn't want me to live on residence because he didn't want to leave the house unattended for long periods of time, so we came to the conclusion it would be best if I would drive to and from school. Now, I would leave for university very early in the morning, at around 6 a.m., then come back around 6 p.m. at night. I stopped being aware of my surroundings at this time because I would be tired from my 12-hour days, and now that I wasn't walking alone, everything would surely be fine. When I would come home from university, though, I would find certain things moved around in my house. Now, I'm a neat freak and I have mild OCD, so I like things to be a very particular way. When things like my makeup or candles would be moved, I thought it was odd and would frequently bring it up to my dad. He would just say that it must have been me who was doing it, but I knew it wasn't. During my 2nd and 3rd year in university, I started getting these weird notes in my mailbox. The writing on these notes looked almost childlike, and it would always be written in blue ink. I have those country-style mailboxes at the end of my driveway, where the little red flag goes up whenever we get mail. From my way back from university, I would always check the mail, and sometimes I would find these letters. The letters would never be long. In fact, they would only be 1 to 3 sentences, and would contain odd questions like, "Where are you? I wonder what you do while you're away from home. How do you find university? It must be tired driving that long. Did you make some new friends? And do you still hang out with that best friend of yours? You dress differently now. Why is that? I miss those scarves you used to wear. You don't close your curtains as much anymore. Why don't you look for me?" These letters would always come once a month at exactly the beginning of the month. I would show my dad, and at first he would say things like, "Oh, maybe your cousins are just pranking you," or "Could it probably be your friends?" Every time I would ask my friends or cousins, though, they would give me this confused response, saying they'd never sent me any letters. Now that I'm at my 4th year at university, the letters do not come as frequently, but 2 weeks ago something happened that makes me think things are escalating. I came back home from university at 7:45 p.m., and it was fairly dark outside. I saw my mailbox flag was up, so I checked and saw it was just bills. At this point, I hadn't gotten a note for a little over 3 months now, so I was thinking maybe the notes would just not come anymore. As I settled in for bed and changed into my pajamas, I checked the locks as usual. As I checked my front door lock, I looked at the glass panel of my door, only to see that the red flag of my mailbox was up. It was 10:30 at night. No way the mail could have just gotten dropped off. Plus, I had just checked it. I called my dad and told him about it. He said not to freak out. Maybe one of our neighbors just accidentally got our mail and dropped it off, since this happens quite frequently. I stay on the phone with my dad as I quickly run down my driveway to check. As I open the mailbox, I feel my heart drop, because it's an unmarked manila envelope. I quickly run back inside and open the manila envelope. Although there's no written note, I find something even more disturbing. It's a pair of my old blue panties that I haven't seen in years. At this point I scream. My dad tells me to hang up and call my aunt, who is a police officer. My aunt comes over and checks the inside and outside of my house, but she couldn't find anything. She tried to jog my memory and asked if I knew anyone who could be doing this, but I honestly have no clue. My aunt told me to keep any more letters I get, and she's been staying with me the days my dad is out for work. My dad is thinking about installing security cameras, and hopefully we can catch whoever it is that way. But what else can I do? I'm so paranoid and scared, because I don't know who this person is, but I know he's been stalking me for a long time. Those panties he sent me were ones I had while I was still in high school, and I lost that pair in grade 10. The fear of the unknown is getting to me so much that my anxiety is not letting me function normally. I just don't know what to do. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any comments about what I could do to improve these videos, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. If you would like to contact me on any social media, links to all of them will be in my description below, including links to my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. If you decide you want to send in a story for me to read in one of these videos, please be sure to message me on any of those and I'll try to read your story as quickly as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what the theme of the story is if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Please be sure to include proper grammar and try to make it as detailed as you feel comfortable with so I can be sure to include it in a video as soon as possible. I would also like to give a special thanks to my friend Killer Orange Cat, who allowed me to use his stories in this video. You will find a link to his channel in the description of this video. Please be sure to check him out and give him some support if you like those stories. Last but not least, guys, I also have 2 other channels you can check out if you'd like to. I do disaster documentaries and true crime documentaries on both of them respectively. That's just some extra thing you can check out if you like my content, and maybe it will be for you. Overall though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. I know I haven't done an outro in a while. I wanted to test and see how the videos without the outros would do. There's a minute difference, but it's not really big enough to never include them again, so I figure I'll just do some outros every now and then. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.